What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Steel Curtain Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of SteelCurtain.com, and joining me, as always, is Steel Curtain co-editor and contributor Shayne Kubas. Shayne, we are approaching the preseason finale coming up tomorrow night as we record this show, but I want to talk about the Steelers' stock report during the preseason here, players that are performing well, those who aren't so much, some that maybe could be on the roster bubble here. We're also going to talk about trades this team could potentially pull off before roster cut down day, which is going to be here before we know it. But Shayne, first I want to talk about today the Steelers Buccaneers and the notes that we have from week 2 of the preseason. I know that this happened. This game occurred on Saturday. Josh, who does the Monday show, already broke the game down in detail, but I want to touch base on that game before we get things kicked off today. Shayne, what were your overall thoughts on Pittsburgh's second preseason game? I know it wasn't, we weren't enthralled by the performance like we were the first time around. Again, it's preseason, it's exhibition action here.
Yeah.
But Steelers obviously lost the games. Result doesn't matter. We're looking for individual performances here. What stood out to you against the Buccaneers?
As far as individual performances, I definitely have a couple, but I just want to start with the run defense. Like, that was the biggest thing that I wanted to see improve in week 2, because we didn't really see a lot of great, run defense tape from this team against Jaguars. Jaguars definitely had some good runs. This week, especially against Bucky Irving, when a lot of guys who weren't even starters out there on defense, they were still doing a really good job of keeping him from impacting the game in the run game. We saw how good Irving was last year with this team, right? So, that was definitely encouraging to see. I think that Derek Harmon getting his first sack with that nice bull rush is definitely something you have to mention. Just kind of nice to see that, right? Like, even though I don't think he played poorly in his first game, seeing him be not just, looking good on the field, but also being productive is huge. Got to shout out Roman Wilson too, right? With those 2 big catches. The type of catches we need to see from him, I think, especially if he's going to be this receiver too, which, hey, we'll talk about it. Maybe he's creeping up to that at this point, right? Calvin Austin missing time. But those 2, I think, definitely stood out. And then, again, like the passing game in general was a little bit not quite as good, I would say, this week 1, especially once Woodside got out there, which he, as a reason he was on the couch, unfortunately. But all in all, it wasn't too bad, I think, for this team.
Yeah, the interceptions from both Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson, I don't really take a big issue with. The passes could have been deeper down the field. I like that you're looking down the field. I think that is necessary if you want to make big plays. Obviously, we hope that neither of those quarterbacks have to see the field this season, but the mentality is correct. And it's preseason. You might as well try things to see what you can get away with. You mentioned some of the things that I was going to mention as well. I thought that Roman Wilson stacked good performances back-to-back now. I think that he's looked impressive. And by most reports, he had a strong finish to Steelers camp this year, which is encouraging. I want to note the offensive line a little bit here too. Run blocking was lacking a little bit early on, but we didn't get any Caleb Johnson rushing reps with the first team offensive line. It was all passing. And so Johnson's production, and I thought he had a bounce back game here, came with the second team offensive line. Also, Broderick Jones did not have the stacked performances like I thought I was hopeful that he would. Like he definitely took a step back in this second game. And we're talking about 10 snaps here, but you can't have 2 poor reps, which is what I counted on on 10 reps total, because that's a bad ratio. You're going to end up getting your quarterback killed. I thought he was really impressive in the opener against Josh Hines-Allen. But yeah, a couple ugly reps in this game. Definitely wanted to see that go the other direction. We didn't quite get it there. But those are some of our notes here, Shayne. We'll probably touch on a few again as we talk about player stock reports here in just a little bit, our big topic for today. But let's move on now, and we're going to talk about Gabe Davis visiting the Steelers a second time. Obviously, he had the visit with Buffalo as well as his former team. Shayne, what do you make of this whole situation? And I think some fans are blowing this wildly out of proportion. I think that they're getting the Gabe Davis of 2022. I would be surprised if he's that player anymore. I wrote an article about this. I got some backlash for using the label washed up. As a 26-year-old, it's not about the age. It's about the meniscus injury. It's about how he looked in his most recent sample, which was pitiful. Like, it was really bad. It was so bad, in fact, for the Jaguars that after one season of handing him a 3-year or $39 million contract, they cut him outright, failed the physical, caught 20 of 42 passes last year, 239 yards, 2 touchdowns, 40% success rate, 47% catch rate. Quarterbacks, including Trevor Lawrence, had a 61.5 pass rating when targeting him. He just was not good at all. Now, obviously, the hope is that if he passes the physical, he can return to more of the player that he was on his first contract in Buffalo. But I don't think that a player in what they do is necessarily tied to their age. It's more about what have you done recently? Can you return to form? I thought even though he was a deep threat guy, I don't think he won with pure speed as a deep receiver. I think it was a lot of the body control type stuff. He had the build-up speed, but I just don't know. I did not see it from him last year, albeit he was playing through injuries. Is this going to be, if the Steelers sign Gabe Davis, and again, we're talking veteran minimum contract here, not a big deal. I mean, are we looking at another like Mike Williams situation? Van Jefferson, by the way, was not old. He was
just bad.
He just wasn't.
He was just bad. Yeah.
He was good in his second season, but as a 28-year-old last year, he was done and he's toast already. So I don't think that being washed up is tied to age. I think it's more about it's a case by case basis of how you are and what injury you're coming off of and what you can do next. I don't know if Gabe Davis has that in him still.
Yeah, to me, like if he's healthy, I think he's definitely a rosterable receiver. I think he's a guy that ideally would be like your fourth wide receiver as that backup, as like a sacrificial X type of guy where he goes out there, runs the go balls, clears guys out, like does that type of stuff. You hope he'll get a couple big catches throughout the season, but I don't think he's a starter anymore at this point, most likely. You know, maybe for this team, if they want someone with more size to be out there with DK, like you could theoretically have him be that role, but again, he's not going to be a huge impact. I don't think you would hope that you get a couple big plays from him. And granted, Mike Williams did make one big play for this team last year. So like if you get like 4 or 5 instead of 1, I think I'd take that. But I do think that for him, it's all about getting healthy and seeing if he still has that juice that he had with the Bills. He is young enough for like theoretically the athleticism shouldn't be declining. It's just if he's healthy, does he still look like the guy that was averaging about 800 yards and multiple touchdowns a year for the Bills? So I don't see it right now, like you said, but then again, he was dealing with injuries. So we'll see if he can get healthy enough to actually make an impact for anyone, let alone us.
Yeah, and you talk about him being a rosterable receiver. I 100% agree. If he is 80% healthy, he's probably worth a roster spot. We know the contract is going to be cheap. It's not going to be, he needs to sign a 1-year prove-it deal, essentially, to show that he's still got it, that the knee's not bothering him. But Shayne, having said that, we're talking about a guy who has 5 combined special team snaps since 2021.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to contribute on special teams, we would assume that if the Steelers are signing him, it's to be part of the offense. It's to make the offense better. Here's the issue that I have. I love what I've been seeing from Roman Wilson. Roman Wilson is a faster player. He can separate better than Gabe Davis. And I'm saying this confidently, even with Wilson playing 5 career snaps and entering his second NFL season, I'm way more optimistic about the future of Roman Wilson than I am about the future of Gabe Davis. And that's where I would almost draw the line and say, hey, if signing Gabe Davis means that you are going to do what you did with Van Jefferson, you're going to do what you did with Mike Williams, you're going to do what you did with Allen Robinson, and you're going to play the veteran as your number 2 receiver over top of the younger, maybe more talented players at this stage of their career, that's where I have the issue. If we're going to delay Roman Wilson's progress another season by signing Gabe Davis, and he doesn't look like the same player that he did in 2022, that's where I take the issue. And so the Steelers would need to figure that out really quickly. Now, you would hope, Shayne, that if you're signing him for the veteran minimum contract, you're not attached to him in any way, shape, or form. And if he's not performing, you just cut bait with him and you play Roman Wilson as your outside receiver in 11 personnel. And maybe he develops even a bigger role than that. But I just haven't seen it from Wilson from Gabe Davis. And I love what I've been seeing from Wilson. I think Wilson is a much better complement to DK Metcalf. And I think that he's the guy that I would want to roll forward with if Gabe Davis is not like 100% the Gabe Davis that we saw in Buffalo.
And I think more importantly, like you said, if they sign him, it has to be for the right reason and for the right role. It should not be to be the receiver 2 or even really the receiver 3. It should be the direct backup to Metcalf if he were to get hurt or needs a break or whatever, as that bigger body downfield threat. Like that's what the role would have to be. So that would make him receiver 4. I think if that bumps someone like Scotty Miller or Robert Woods or whoever it is, that last receiver is going to end up being on the team. Like that's fine because I don't think it matters that much.
Yeah.
But if it does interfere with Wilson getting playing time he needs to develop, if it does interfere with Austin, honestly, who's just a more explosive, more valuable player, then that's where I'll have an issue. But I do think having a backup to DK that has a similar size profile at least does make sense. They really don't have that outside of maybe Brandon Johnson, but he's not quite as big as him, of course. He's at least a taller player. We'll see if Johnson even makes the team, but that would be the only other guy that kind of fits as a backup to DK right now.
Yeah, and obviously we'd have to pass that physical. Not sure how that visit is going with the Steelers here, but that would be the deciding factor. And I think it only makes sense for that last wide receiver spot to take the place of Robert Woods or Scotty Miller, which it looks a lot more like Scotty Miller these days than Robert Woods. Robert Woods playing late into the second half of that
we'll
preseason
talk about that.
Ben Skoranek, you got to keep him around. I think he's the best gunner on the team. And so if it's taking the place of a Scotty Miller to be an emergency backup X, essentially, if DK gets hurt this season, that would make the most sense, assuming that he, like, again, is at least 80% of the player that we saw from the past. I just don't want to sign him and repeat the same mistakes the Steelers have made the last 3 years by taking veterans who maybe have already played their best football. And again, it's age-wise, he should still have his best football in front of him, but we don't know with those knee injuries, meniscus tears. He needs to have a prove-it year, and I think that's why he's going to sign somewhere for the veteran minimum if he can pass a physical. And there's already multiple teams that have failed him, which again is another big red flag. So I think we all just, as Steelers fans, we just need to pump the brakes on the Gabe Davis hype train a little bit here. We got to see what he's looking like these days before we can get too excited about potentially landing him. All right, Shayne, I want to move on to our first big discussion topic of the day, and that is trades the Steelers could potentially make before roster cutdowns. Now, the NFL has moved away from the multiple cutdown days. We get to see just a flood of people entering the market, the waiver wire, all at once. It's going to happen soon here. The Steelers have the first of the week 3 preseason games as they play the early game on Thursday evening. But then after this weekend, Shayne, we're going to start seeing just a wave of players hitting the market, becoming available here. Some maybe the Steelers would be interested in trying to bolster some of the weaker positions on their roster, which we can talk about. But I first want to ask, which players should the Steelers be looking to trade away? Which players from the roster right now, first of all, are worth trade value? And secondly, that you would be willing to trade? And so I automatically X a player like Nick Herbig. Like you need
you're not going to do
that. 23, 24-year-old pass rusher who is the absolute depth and security you need at the position that you rely on most on your defense. So I'm thinking of players, Shayne, but I'll let you go and drop a name first, and then we'll kind of go back and forth.
I think the first player that comes to mind, and this is one where it's tough to say whether they could get because this would be like one of those conditional 7th or one of those ones, or just pick swap late. But you probably should look to try to trade the loser of the punter battle just to get some value for that player, because I think both of them have shown enough that another team could very much want them on their roster to replace their punting situation. So if you can do that, whether it's Waitman or Johnston, and we assume it's going to be Waitman that loses the battle between the fact that Johnston is making the most money and he overall just has more of a leg to him than Waitman does. That's most likely what I think is going to happen. But whoever it is, I think could possibly fetch them a late pick.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote an article about this recently on how the Steelers can do something that they haven't done in 10 years. It was almost to the day, Shayne, 10 years ago, or coming up to the day 10 years ago, that the Steelers traded Brad Wing, their backup punter, to the New York Giants for a conditional 7th round pick. They ended up getting that pick from him. And you don't see it very often. I think punters have been traded there's one time, I think since 2018 that a punter has been, or 2019, something like that a punter has been traded in the NFL. But the Steelers have 2 legitimate punters on the roster. I think 2 maybe top 15 NFL punters. Waitman was good last year. He was a good player. And even this decision probably isn't the easiest one. I think that it's going to be Cameron Johnston earning the job. He's the guy that they paid. I think he's got a little bit bigger leg.
Yep.
But Waitman, I think, is at least enticing to some teams out there that maybe don't have a stable punter situation right now. Maybe especially if a punter gets injured in this preseason finale, week 3 here. I think that it's possible, albeit unlikely, that the Steelers could do a 6th to 7th round pick swap at the highest, and then maybe low in the conditional 7th round future draft pick. And look, if you can get anything for your backup punter,
it's better than
instantly.
Him,
he's not going to make the team. He's not going to make the team, and so you're not keeping 2 rosters. That would be roster building malpractice, or excuse me, 2 punters. That would be roster building malpractice. And so one of those guys has to go. Yep. I agree with you there, and I would absolutely be shopping him around, saying and going to teams that don't have a great punter situation, say, would you be interested in our guy that we have here for you? Shayne, another name that I have out there right now, and again, we're talking about guys that hold very minimal, if any, trade value, but it doesn't hurt to look around to some needy teams. And one guy that out there that just has never really fit in this defense at all is DeMarvin Leal.
Yep, I knew those.
Former 5-star recruit, played SEC football. He's still really young. The guy's 24 years old still, entering the last year of his rookie contract. He would have been better off. I think we both agree on like a true 4-3 team being like a penetrating 3 technique. The problem is he's a tweener in a bad way. He's not fast enough to be a full-time edge, which really negates his impact there. And he's not strong enough to be a full-time interior guy. Maybe in the right situation, he could go to a team and just they like his position flexibility to be like a base, a base end, base edge, and a guy that can slide inside and just be like one of the bottom of the roster, like defensive lineman. And what would you get for that? Not much at all. Or again, we're talking about a conditional 7th round pick, maybe a like 2027 6th and 7th round pick swap type of deal here. Maybe a player swap to give somebody this
back into the roster,
a depth O-lineman that's going to get cut or something that way. That's what we're looking at with a potential DeMarvin Leal trade. It would not be much at all. But Shayne, I don't see room for him on this roster. The Steelers bolstered their interior defensive line depth. I think we know who the top 4 edge guys are, and historically they only keep 4 edges. There's no incentive, I don't think, to keep him over a Jack Sawyer, and we'll talk about Sawyer here in a minute, but still, Sawyer's a rookie, and so and Leal's entering the last year, and we just haven't seen much growth. He'd be another guy that'd be looking to trade.
Yeah, I think, again, he's the one that is the most intriguing. That's a cut candidate for teams, I think, that they might be looking to hope he gets cut, of course, because he most likely will. At this point, at least, I think that's where he's heading if he doesn't get traded. But there's 3 teams that kind of stand out to me that could have some interest in a player like him. Dallas, because they love the guys that are like the high end like profiles and 5 stars and stuff like that. They love those guys. That's why they always pick up like failed 1st round picks. The Eagles, I think, make a lot of sense because they also love those types of interior players that have a lot of flexibility and the ability to move around. And then Seattle loves their like bigger base ends. That's why they brought in Marcus Lawrence for the Cowboys this offseason. That defense can make use of a guy like that. So those are kind of some of the teams I think might show some interest if he's made available or if they think he's going to be cut. But I still kind of unfortunately feel like his future is going to be being cut from this team and either being picked up by one of those types of teams or ending up on the practice squad.
Yeah, 100%, Shayne. And I got another name out there for you as well. Beanie Bishop Jr. I mean, the Steelers have we don't get to say this often about this team, but they're really deep at cornerback. And so
really,
I don't know. I mean, I think Trice is up in the air and maybe on the outside looking in, which is terribly unfortunate. The problem is Trice is also injured and probably doesn't have any trade value because he can't stay healthy. But Bishop is a guy who I think is legitimately on the roster bubble because they are so deep at the position. Not only, I mean, everybody wants to talk about Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay. They also got Brandon Eccles, who might play the dime backer role this year if Trice is not healthy or not on the roster. They may keep Pierre around for special teams purposes, which, I mean, you know my thoughts about him playing defense. I think he's a good special teamer. We'll see what they end up doing here. But if you can get a 7th round pick out of Beanie Bishop Jr., who is entering his 2nd NFL season, he played all 17 games last year. He was Pittsburgh's starting slot corner. Played exactly 50% of the team's snaps. He's got that year of experience under his belt. He had 4 interceptions with the team last year. You would think that he would at least catch the attention maybe of a cornerback needy team out there.
For sure, he definitely could. But I think part of the problem for me is like, I just don't think he's somebody that they want to lose or that they should want to lose right now. Because if Jalen Ramsey, let's say Ramsey's seemingly going to be the slot a lot of the time, right? Like that seems where we're heading. If Darius Slay gets hurt or Joey Porter Jr. gets hurt, would you rather have Jalen Ramsey step into that spot and then have Bishop in the slot? Or would you have Brandon Echols go start outside corner and have I'd much rather have Bishop as a true backup slot, a guy that can come in to relieve Ramsey occasionally if he needs it, or just give a different look, than have Echols kind of having to slide all over the place, right? And I think Echols has had a good training camp and preseason. Like I think he's fine, but Bishop has the experience in this defense as a slot corner last year. He knows what is going on. At least he did show some ball skills, obviously with the 4 interceptions. This is not a player that I would want to lose, even if you could get something back for him as an undrafted free agent. So I'm hoping if they trade him, they can get something of actual value for him, basically, is where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and I 100% get that thought process, Shayne. I would push back a little bit and say, ideally, a corner doesn't get injured at least early enough into this season that Corey Trice would be ready to come back on the field, because I would rather have Corey Trice playing the slot than Beanie Bishop. But again, guys made of glass, and we can't count on him either. Right. And also, ideally, Brandon Echols has the profile of a slot receiver. He just doesn't have the experience there. The Steelers have tried him there a little bit. Maybe I would almost feel like I would trust him maybe more there anyway, because he's the veteran and he's had a really strong summer. But I get what you're saying. And Bishop is a guy who is probably going to make the roster as one of the final players here, but
I think so. Yeah.
Doesn't offer as much special teams value as a guy like James Pierre, and is kind of like a backup nickel cornerback only. And so we'll see what that role ultimately leads to. Shayne, are there any other players, if you were the Steelers, that you would consider trading away before roster cuts?
This is another one that's tough because I just don't know if they can get anything for this player. But there's a lot of teams that probably would like to have a better backup situation, or at least somebody to compete for that spot. And Skylar Thompson has looked pretty good this preseason overall. Like I think that there's a chance, depending on how they deal with Will Howard, like does he end up doing the IR thing or whatever ends up happening with him? But it doesn't seem like he's going to have to do that. It seems like he's going to be healthy soon enough that they don't have to go that route with him. I still think, despite Thompson playing well, he's not going to beat Howard out for that spot for a host of reasons, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think another team could use somebody who, admittedly, his NFL experience has gone poorly when he's played, but he does have NFL experience. He has started games in the NFL, a playoff game even. Not that it went particularly well, but you get the point. Like, I think there's teams out there that could value that. And if you can get, again, like another late-round pick swap or a 7th or whatever, you got him for nothing. So why not try to swap them out if you can, if there's anyone interested in them?
100%. I actually wrote about this as well, Shayne. Anytime you can get something out of a player you know isn't going to make the roster, you try to do it at the very least. And the Steelers should be talking to every team right now, every NFL team that has.
Yeah, how do you feel about your backup situation right now?
I know. I mean, even look at Dallas and Joe Milton. It's like, if the starter gets injured, Skylar Thompson, I mean, he's 28 years old, even though he hasn't been in the league that long. He's 28. He had a lot of college experience. Mm-hmm. He's had a good preseason. He has a couple starts under his belt. You mentioned the playoff start. This preseason so far, by the way, he's 30 of 43, 346 yards, 8 yards an attempt, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, a 107.3 passer rating. It's preseason. I don't want to blow those numbers out. We saw Kenny Pickett have a perfect passer rating in the preseason, and he was bad. So the numbers don't really matter, but maybe they're good enough to intrigue a team that doesn't have a stable QB2 or QB3. He's certainly good enough to be a QB3 on some team and to come into an emergency situation. I think of a team like the Colts. If the Colts were to trade away Anthony Richardson, now that Daniel Jones has been declared the starter, and they do not plan to go back to Richardson.
No, which is crazy to me, by the way. But
they don't. I think it's because Steichen and Ballard, they've got jobs on the line here. They'd rather go with a guy that's a little less high variance, I guess.
I mean, I would just if they were them naming Daniel Jones is probably enough for me to fire them as it is. So like maybe that's just me, but whatever. But
I get it. I get it. I mean, again, there's some wonky stuff going on around the league. But if they were to trade Richardson, it's like, do you trust Riley Leonard to come in, a 7th round rookie to come in? If you have an injury there, maybe you would want. So there are teams that could use or potentially use a Skylar Thompson. Again, you're not getting much, if anything, out of him.
Right.
Most teams would probably want that conditional 7th round draft choice.
Yes, be active for a certain amount of games.
Yeah, it'd be the active thing. If your starter gets injured, he comes and is the active number 2, not necessarily seeing playing time, but that's the type of deal that we're talking about here. Maybe you can sucker somebody into you swapping 7th round picks in 2027 or something stupid like that. But if you know without a doubt, like Will Howard's going to be healthy from that pinky injury, he's going to be our QB3. We are not going to keep 4 quarterbacks. Again, roster malpractice. Try to trade him now. That's the best thing that you can do. That was the other name that I had listed. Shayne, do you have any others out there that would even be you would consider trading away, especially knowing that the Steelers have to try to win this year?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I will say that just in final thought on the Thompson thing, like his numbers are very good. I also just think he's looked very good in his actual film itself, because the stats can lie in the preseason, right?
I mean, he looks comfortable, confident.
Yeah, like that little flip he did to Johnson with that like improvisational play, like that type of stuff. Like that's the type of stuff you haven't seen from him in games before, really, even in the preseason from what I've seen of him in the past. Like he just looks more like a prepared NFL quarterback. And granted, is that still probably a low-end backup, high-end number 3? Yeah, but there are teams out there that have a bigger need for that than the Steelers do. So again, if you can get any sort of capital for him, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about now, Shayne, what positions could the Steelers trade for? We talked about the players they could trade away. Where do they need the help the most? And I can start on this one. Your interior offensive line and your tackles. I mean, are you talking about
this offensive line depth?
Yes, offensive line. Preferably a guy that maybe is flexible enough to do a little bit of everything. But then again, those guys aren't really becoming available.
Not really.
You have to look at a team that has really good O-line depth in general, where maybe a guard could be their odd man out, something like that, because there's just nobody trustworthy on the backup offensive line. Like who of all the backup offensive linemen do you feel most confident in? Spencer Anderson coming in if something goes south?
I mean, unless Andrus Peat starts to look more like a veteran than a good veteran, then probably, right? Like that. Because I don't trust
know
the
if he's made
tackles.
the roster even.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the point. Like it doesn't even really know. It doesn't seem like he's necessarily going to. Of those guys, probably, like you said, Spencer Anderson. I don't know if I trust any of them. I have at least seen Anderson play for this team a little bit and been okay. Like you could say that much. But that's a part of the problem. And like this has been a conversation recently because of like roster cuts coming up and like people looking at teams across the league. The idea that the NFL could ever expand is hilarious to me, because there's not enough good offensive linemen to cover 32 teams. There's not every team has at least like 1 or 2 holes on their offensive line, seemingly, except for like 4, and the rest of them are like, well, we're going to try this guy at right guard this year, or it's just there's no way. Like they're
going to try to expand.
Like there's going to be 2 teams if they do that. Like if there's 2 more teams, there's going to be 2 teams every year who basically can't pass protect or run block for anything. Like that's just what's going to happen. It's going to be insane. So like, I don't know, but that's part of the problem is if you look across the league, like there's guys who have experience and who have some talent that might be kind of the odd man out for one reason or another. You look at like, I know that we've had guys write a lot about on the site. Cole Strange is a name that keeps coming up because of, what's going on with Patriots and how much they've overhauled their offensive line. But you could take a shot on a redemption project like an Evan Neal if the Giants want to cut bait on him. But there's a reason why those guys aren't maybe going to make the roster, or at least aren't a priority, because they haven't been good or they haven't been healthy, one or the other. It's just tough to find upgrades at that position.
Yeah, Shayne, and I compare it to Pittsburgh's O-line depth last year, and it looked so much different. We're talking about that last year, beginning the season, like on the bench, technically Zach Frazier. I think if either Zach Frazier or Nate Herbig.
Yeah.
And this was before Herbig's season-ending injury. So Frazier obviously would have been the guy eventually.
Yeah, but either way,
you had Nate Herbig on the bench last year. You had Mason McCormick on the bench last year before James Daniels' season-ending injury. You had Broderick Jones as your swing tackle last year because Dan Moore and Troy
Good old
Fautanu was the
Namor.
week 1
Yeah.
starters. So, and then Fautanu, they had 3 important players go down with season-ending injuries. If that happened this year, season is done. You can put a fork in it because the Steelers aren't getting protection. They're not running the ball, and that's what the entire Arthur Smith offense is predicated on. So I do think that they need to try to find a way to bolster their offensive line depth, whether that's finding a swing tackle that can also kick inside the guard, a guard that can also play center, like a guy that can wear a couple hats that you can feel comfortable about if there are any of those guys out there. I know Dalton Reisner is a guy who is a free agent, but the Steelers are potentially looking at him. I would assume that he wants to be a starter, but
that's the problem.
I mean,
it's like, do you
can pay him like a starter and say, you just get to hold a clipboard, man, and you get to tell the other guys what to do, and we're going to pay you like a starter. The Steelers can afford to do that.
They can.
And say if he has to see the field, but he's not going to take McCormick's job, I don't think.
I don't think so. At least you hope not, because I don't think that's ultimately beneficial. As much as it'd be nice to have one of those guys as depth, like someone who should be starting games isn't going to be playing then. And then it's like, well, how do you deal with that? McCormick's already an older prospect, so you don't want to have him wait too long to kind of get his true runway. So it's just, again, it's tough. It is.
Yeah, it is. Any other positional groups, Shayne, that you're looking at the Steelers should try to trade for before roster cuts?
I think even though they've impressed me, if there's a receiver out there that is legitimately a good number 2 or number 3 potential option that could come loose, be pried away pretty easily. I look at the Packers still. Like, it's just that depth chart is just so full of dudes. And yeah, some of them have their flaws, but that's why they're probably going to be either available or someone who can come in and doesn't have to be like this huge role. But if you could get like a Dontavian Wicks, who has a lot of issues catching the football, but when he does catch the football, it's very good. Like a true number 2, number 3 type of receiver. Does Christian Watson figure into their plans because he's coming back from the injury last year? Like, what do they do with him? Are they going to stash him and then hope that he can come back? And especially with the way that Matthew Golden has apparently been playing, and I've been following that, of course, is my receiver 1 in the draft. They probably feel very comfortable with him being their number 1 wide receiver, their de facto number 1 at least. So does that mean someone's going to come loose? I mean, they have I can't even think of his name right now, but I think Bo Melton. They have him playing corner now. That's how deep the receivers are. And he's made plays for this team as a receiver in the past. So it just feels like that if they're going to target someone, probably someone from that room makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's worth mentioning, Shayne, now that you mentioned the Packers receivers, Romeo Doubs does have 1 year of overlap with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. So there was already a little bit of chemistry going on there with Doubs. Another name, Shayne, I'll throw out there at the receiver position. Would you be interested at all in a guy like Jalen Polk, like this failed second-round experiment? I was not high on Jalen Polk coming out of Washington. I know that a lot of people really liked him. I think I had a 4th or 5th round grade on him. But things seem to be going south with him quickly in New England. There's another name to keep an eye on, I guess, potentially. But to me, Shayne, it's almost like, all right, if you're not finding an actual upgrade over a Roman Wilson or a Calvin Austin, is it worth the trade?
Right. Trading for him, I don't think. I think if he actually got cut, I do think plenty of teams will be looking to try to add him on the waivers just to see if there is something there. And it's weird with him because I did have, for me, I thought of him as more of like a late day 2 receiver personally. I was surprised that he's getting it cut this early potentially, not because I thought he was great. I just thought he was a very high floor player. Like, I didn't think his issue was going to be, can he play? It's, can he be like a receiver 2 opposed to like a receiver 3 or 4? So that's the part that's most interesting to me with him. But I do think there's enough skills there, enough talent where theoretically he should be able to make a name for himself as at least one of the receivers in the rotation. Just hasn't been able to do it for whatever reason with the Patriots.
Yeah, it's interesting. A very slow start for him. Shayne, are there any other positional groups that you would consider trading for if you were the Steelers?
I mean, at this point, the safety room still, like, I know it hasn't been an issue in the preseason, but it's preseason. I just don't love looking at the depth chart right now. But I also don't know if there's really, a truly impactful player out there that could be had for anything that was not pretty significant at this point. Like, that's kind of my issue with it.
Well, one name that did pop up just today, I believe, was Kyle Duggar.
Yeah. But he's not really like Elliott and him would kind of be like Elliott at this point. Is more of, I think he's a better version of that, honestly, despite Duggar's, past performance. I don't know if he would really fill the role that you'd want him to fill is the only problem with him. But good player potentially out there.
Yeah, and some of the other names I just want to mention that have been thrown out as either actual trade candidates or probably pretty open to being trade candidates. Brian Robinson Jr. of Washington Commanders, running back. It's so weird because Commanders are apparently comfortable with Krosky Merritt and
Chris Rodriguez Jr. and Eckler.
Yeah, so it's odd, but I mean, I wouldn't for the Steelers. I think for the right team, you throw a 6th round pick at Washington, and that's fine. But that's not one I'm really interested in.
The sad part is Dallas is the team that would need him the most. They're not going to give him to Dallas. Dallas has the worst running back group. I haven't seen a group this like sad going into a season in a while. Like the husk of the husk of Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders is not good. It's just not.
Oh, man.
But
so maybe those were two of like the least efficient running backs over the past couple of years in football. So
it's not great.
It's interesting. And then obviously the big one out there right now, Anthony Richardson. I at least have to mention him on here.
I mean,
this is the most polarizing type of quarterback that there is. We see how well the Joe Milton experience is going in Dallas. Not good. If you haven't been paying attention, he can't hit the broad side of the barn with a football. I think that Richardson's better than him, but I don't think it's by like leaps and bounds. The one thing I would mention here, he's 23.2 years old. He's younger than Will Howard, who the Steelers just drafted this year. And we knew that this guy was raw as anything. Like you needed to give him years to kind of sit behind a competent quarterback and figure it out. Now, the Steelers quarterback room is too crowded as it is. So if this is a big if situation, hypothetical, won't happen. But if the Steelers were to have interest in Richardson, what you do is you trade for him, maybe include Skylar Thompson in the deal, throw in the 4th round pick, maybe Steelers get a 7th rounder back. You make him your QB3 this year. You stash Will Howard on season-ending IR. And then next year, Shayne, we're looking big picture here. Next year, you go in with Mason Rudolph, Anthony Richardson, and Will Howard as your competing quarterbacks. You almost certainly draft a guy. There's going to be an odd guy out, kind of like the Browns quarterback situation this year. I think there's very, very little chance that Anthony Richardson turns out to be a franchise quarterback. But when you have 100 percentile size, tools, arm talent, and legs, it's just I'm a sucker for those guys. They're going to burn me every time.
Yeah, here's the thing with Anthony Richardson. I've had a lot of conversations with people over the past 24 hours about this situation because, of course, it's a big topic right now. There's 3 major things to think about with him. One is when the Colts drafted him, and this is you could make the same argument for the Niners when they drafted Trey Lance. Teams who take quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson and like Trey Lance need to remember it a year in the future. They need to remember what they did because a lot of times it feels like they forgot that they drafted a quarterback that didn't have a lot of experience in college, needed a lot of time, needed a lot of reps. It wasn't going to be pretty. If you're not willing to deal with that, if your organization is not stable enough or seemingly stable enough to allow you to go through the roller coaster of that situation, then don't draft these guys. Like you simply can't. Look at what Josh Allen looked like the first 2.5-ish years of his career. Yes, there was more flashes than you probably got from either Lance or even Richardson, despite some of his flashes, which, I mean, I think last year he had the greatest throw anyone's ever had. I still believe that. Yeah. That throw against the Texans is I still can't believe that it exists. Like every time I see it, I'm like, that wasn't real. It was AI or something. But Allen showed enough flashes that gave him the runway. They said, hey, just go out there, play your game, develop, learn what you need to learn. And look what they've gotten out of him. Now, is that the absolute, like, 100th percentile outcome? Yes. Are you hoping more for, like, a 50th percentile outcome most of the time? Yes. But they did not do what they needed to do to allow this to work out. And despite all of that, he's only played 15 games in his first 2 years. Yes, he's been banged up. That is certainly on him. He's 8-7 as a starter. It's not even like they were tanking with him. They weren't even losing with him. He was 6-5 last year as a starter. Yeah, it didn't look pretty, but they weren't like bottoming out. And that's the most frustrating part is like, if you weren't bottoming out with this dude playing, let him go out there and play, figure it out. Your run game was spectacular with him and Jonathan Taylor. You were able to win 6 out of, again, 11 games with him as a starter last year. I just don't get this thought process of like, okay, let's go get Daniel Jones. Let's let him compete. Because the problem is if you're going to bring someone in to compete with Anthony Richardson, he better be also actually good So that way, when you do ultimately let him win the job because you don't want Richardson anymore, you at least have a chance to save your job and compete. I don't think they have that with Daniel Jones. So just this whole thing makes no sense to me.
Yeah, Shayne, I think it might be a collection of things, and maybe it was, I mean, I know it rubbed people the wrong way when he pulled himself out. The one time he got
I
banged
understand.
up. You don't do that as a quarterback. The injuries, he's having trouble staying on the field, obviously, those first 2 seasons, the inconsistencies, the accuracy. But like you said, you drafted him knowing that he was one of the rawest quarterbacks we've ever seen. You have to give him time. The problem is, Shayne, I want to point the finger a little bit at ownership here because when you're putting the pressure on Shayne Steichen, your head coach, and Chris Ballard, your GM, it's like, you guys need to produce now, or you guys, it's going to be your heads. It's like, all right, well, what do we go and draft this guy?
So why'd you sign off on
project?
Yeah.
So, and again, there's no guarantee that Richardson ever gets it. You could, I mean, coach him up until the cows come home, but he might not become the quarterback you want him to be. I still would gamble on those guys, but shame on them for not giving him the time to at least show that he could be that. And maybe he's not at all. Like I said, it's
again,
very high variance quarterback.
Yeah. Odds are he's not, but at least, like, the thing with him too is you can't coach the stuff that he has. You can coach everything else. But so it's up to you to coach those things in him, and he has to abide by that too. Like, he has to be coachable, and we don't know everything that's gone into that with him. We don't know exactly where he's at as far as his coachability and his work ethic. But in my opinion, call Josh Allen and be like, hey, who's the quarterback coach that helped you fix your mechanics again? What's that guy's name? All right, Anthony, you're going to go live with that guy. Like, we'll pay him to make sure you're allowed just to stay there and just be there every day for the whole offseason. And then you come back and let's see what your accuracy looks like. Because at some point, that you have to do everything in your power to make that guy work. And if he's not doing enough himself or this or that, then it becomes obviously a situation with the player. But I don't think they did everything they could have done. It's very clear they didn't do everything they could have done.
Yeah, I think so too. Not to get on a huge tangent about Anthony Richardson here, but it's the big news around the NFL in recent days. And man, like I said, Shayne, those guys, I will get burnt by those guys every time because the tools, the traits are there where you have no physical limitations, even a little bit.
No.
It's all about your mechanics. Can you get it down? Can you be accurate? And I'm not convinced that he can, but I would still consider taking a shot at it. The Steelers will not, for what it's worth. All right. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. All right. And if you guys are in with us live right now, please consider dropping a chat in live chat. If you have any questions you'd like to ask Shayne and I, we would love to be able to answer those for you. And let's continue on, Shayne, by talking about our Steelers preseason stock report. We are 2 games into this thing. The Steelers play tomorrow night as we are recording this show for their 3rd and final preseason game. But I want to start with players who have rising stock so far, who has helped their chances greatly. And let's kind of just go down through the positions here, if you will, Shayne. And I want to start with a guy that we've mentioned. We'll talk about him briefly since we've already talked about him. But Skylar Thompson, a player who, I mean, was a 100% undeniable, like definite, you're going to be cut. There's no chance you making this roster. All of a sudden, after 2 preseason games, goes to a guy, well, maybe if we keep a 4th quarterback and then we try to stash Howard after he gets on so he doesn't have to go on season-ending IR, there's at least an avenue now where the Steelers keep a Skylar Thompson, or like we talked about, potentially seeing if there's anybody that would take bait on a trade out there. But he is stock up after these first 2 preseason games.
He absolutely is. And I think I got to give him credit because I kind of just wrote him off as a camp arm because that's kind of what he's looked like in his career. He's done a really good job. And I think the fact that Will Howard did kind of very clearly become the 3rd quarterback doesn't necessarily mean that Skylar Thompson isn't worthy of being a 3rd quarterback or even a backup somewhere else. I do think Will Howard just was having a really good preseason and training camp before the preseason. So I do think that if he stays on the roster, it is going to be to kind of just give Howard more time to recover because he hasn't been able to practice or do anything for a while. But I still ultimately think he's going to be elsewhere one way or another.
Yeah, I would think so as well. Let's talk about running backs here, Shayne. And obviously, a lot of these starters haven't even played football yet in preseason. Jaylen Warren hasn't. But Caleb Johnson, a guy who is really people really came down hard on him after that first preseason game. I thought there was not a lot of running room. For what it's worth, in week 1 of the preseason against the Jaguars, Johnson averaged 4 yards a carry with the team's starting offensive line, albeit I think it was on 3 carries. And then his final 5 carries came with the backup offensive line, where he averaged 1.2 yards a carry, was hit constantly behind the line of scrimmage. Just not a lot of room. In week 2, though, against the Buccaneers, I thought Johnson did a really good job bouncing back and looking like the player that we saw at Iowa. You take those cutback lanes in the wide zone offense. You are decisive. You turn it upfield. You break arm tackles, which for what it's worth, PFF has Johnson as tied for the league. I think it's tied for the league lead after 2 preseason games in broken tackles so far in the preseason with 7. So some of those are just slipped arm tackles, but we know that he does that well. Had the 14-yarder where he bounced it across the field. He had one play. Actually, the play I was most impressed with, Shayne, with Caleb Johnson, is where he should have been stuffed at the line of scrimmage or maybe for a loss for this a stretch wide left. And there was like 3 guys there. He goes completely horizontal, outruns all 3 of them, and then at the last possible second turns it upfield for a 7-yard gain. That's the kind of stuff. There's not a chance that Najee has that gear to do that. And so I was really impressed by the bounce back performance I saw with him. So I'm going to put him on the stock up list.
Yeah, he's definitely stock up. I will say, and I wrote about this, after the game, despite him having a strong performance, the fact that Kenneth Gainwell was out there to start the game and he didn't get any carries behind the starting offensive line does make me think that, there's a chance that we don't see him a lot early on in this rookie season, at least to start. And so I don't want people to, freak out about that or anything. I don't think it necessarily means anything is terrible with him, but it does seem like he is truly the 3rd running back currently.
And I think that that'll change very quickly in the
season.
It
won't last.
The Steelers once you see you have more power and burst and long speed. And for what it's worth, Gainwell had 2 carries for 2 yards in this game, so he didn't do anything overly impressive.
Really
tiny sample,
either, to be fair.
So no, it's one of those situations. We know that Johnson is the draft investment, the guy that we expect to get it eventually, and at least took it a step in the right direction against the Buccaneers this past Saturday. Let's move on to actually, there's another guy I want to talk about in the stock up at running back, and that's Lou Nichols, a guy that was on nobody's radar. And all of a sudden, each of these past 2 games showing some explosiveness to his game, some wiggle in open space. Super duper long shot to make this roster, I think. And in fact, it's nearly impossible, I would say, especially if the Steelers are just keeping 3 running backs. We know who those guys are. But I would mention him as a stock up guy nonetheless.
Yeah, really should hopefully be back in the practice squad, but I wouldn't be shocked if another team scooped him up before they could get him on the practice squad. I'm not going to say that's impossible. So,
yeah, strong performance. Why not? Let's move on, Shayne, talk about the tight end position here. And Darnell Washington is a guy who just continues to, for as big as he is, he gets overlooked somehow.
Yeah, somehow people just forget about him.
Even going back to when Washington was drafted, it was considered an incredible draft steal when the Steelers got him at pick 93, I think it was, when he was a top 32 player on the consensus draft board. And he's done nothing to prove that he can't be a one-of-one type of tight end in terms of the size, blocking ability. He's shown that again in the preseason. He made, obviously, in week 1 of the preseason, had the big touchdown catch down the seam where you just can't do anything about it. If you're on the wrong side and you're not in position, he will box you out. And so this is a guy that I want to see get involved, but he's also stock up.
Absolutely stock up. And I think the thing with Washington is people might look at his production and immediately go like, oh, that was a 3rd round pick that wasn't needed. This is not the kind of player that you can look at their receiving production and gauge how good they've been. Like, he has been phenomenal as that true, like, road grading second tight end, pseudo offensive lineman, right? And we joke about all the time that he could probably play better left tackle than a lot of guys, but like, he truly has been worth the investment. And I think if he does get the ball more, this is a player that is a unique matchup problem. He just is. They haven't been able to take advantage of it. But now that Aaron Rodgers is in here and he seems to like him a lot, I wouldn't be surprised if Washington has multiple receiving touchdowns this year, a couple big plays, some dump offs that go for good gains. Like, we've seen him do it, especially last year. We got some of that finally. And now with there being 2 other tight ends that are receiving threats ahead of him, obviously his production is going to be limited, but it should be more impactful when he does get the ball this year.
Yeah, Shayne, you can bet that we're going to see some 13 personnel this year, probably often. And why not? I mean, you got the personnel grouping to do it. He is, I mean, for my money, I'd have to go through all the teams in my head here, but the best tight end 3 in the NFL. You're not getting another guy that can bring what he brings to the table in terms of size, power, skill set. So it's nice to see that he's continuing, and he's a young player still. Going to the offensive line, Shayne, here, it hasn't been like an uber dominant performance by this unit. I thought the starting unit did really good against Jacksonville, took a little bit of a step back last week, but I want to mention Troy Fautanu, a guy that just is a nimble footed pass protector. I thought that that's the player he could be coming out of Washington. He's looking the part already, I must say. Gives a little bit of leeway when it comes to the power rushes, but usually stalls guys out. But you're not getting around him. He's been quick to counter inside, which was labeled as one of his weaknesses early on. I've just been impressed. You put on the all 22. I've been really impressed with Fautanu over his first 2 preseason games.
Yeah, he's been very good. I would say that we talked about earlier, Broderick Jones is kind of, I think he's in neutral right now, where it's like he had a really good performance against Jacksonville, not as good against the Buccaneers. Now, was it disastrous? No. Like, he had the one pass blocking rep where he gets shed quickly and like dips his head, and to his credit, he did try to circle back and find work, and like he's definitely giving the effort out there, and I think he's mostly been good, but it's just hard to tell with him because it's much of the same story of like really good reps a lot of the time, and then boom, it's like a disastrous rep. Like that's the thing he's got to clean up. But overall, I think the offensive line group, especially the starters, have looked the part so far.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, in week 1 preseason game against Jacksonville, Broderick and Fautanu combined to allow 0 pressures to Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, 2 former top 7 overall picks, one of them the first overall pick in the draft. So I think that it's been a solid performance overall. Shayne, moving to the defensive line, I want to talk about the 2 rookies, Derek Harmon and Y.A. Black. Y.A. Black was more impressive in the first game, Harmon more impressive in the second game. We're seeing the flashes from them. They haven't been like totally consistent, and we would expect that from young rookies like this. But Black, I mean, like 5 out of 10 plays, he really popped in week 1 of the preseason. This past game, I cut up like 6 or 7 plays of Derek Harmon where I thought even run defense, like shedding blocks, stopping power, and then especially that one play on the bull rush where he just walked the guard back into the quarterback for the big sack. You're starting to see it with them.
Absolutely. I think the Y.A. Black of it all, he's the one that I think is most, obviously surprising and encouraging, because you knew Derek Harmon was going to show flashes. Like, we knew that about him. Black, in this case, being the one who seemingly could be the 4th interior player at this point. Like, it seems like that's kind of the pecking order. You have obviously like the top 3 with Ben Harmon and Hayward, and then after that, like, Black might be the first guy in, especially with his run defense capabilities. Like, just makes a lot of sense. So that's something I wouldn't have guessed coming into the preseason. And again, Harmon with the bull rush, like, he just needs to continue to do stuff like that, because he was a guy who quickly won a lot of the time, did a lot of finesse moves at Oregon. He does have that power profile, though, as a former like 330 plus pounder at Michigan State. Like, he has that ability to do that. Didn't show it as much at Oregon, but showing it in the preseason early is very good.
For sure. Shayne, moving on to linebacker here, I would say that I would put Cole Holcomb on this list. And I know that he hasn't been perfect in terms of like pass coverage, but out of all the linebackers not named Peyton Wilson and Patrick Queen, who Queen hasn't played in the preseason, but Cole Holcomb looks 100% like the guy that you would turn to if an injury happened, or even just the first guy off the bench. Like, he's the most well-rounded of the backups. And I think that it showed these first 2 preseason games.
Yeah, it's just really good to see. Again, we've said it multiple times. It's just really good to see him get back out there and look himself, right? And yeah, the pass coverage stuff, I think he's a little bit more limited than a lot of the other guys in the roster are, especially the top 2 guys in terms of movement skills and stuff. But he's got the IQ for it. He has enough speed and lateral movement to not be a liability, I think. I do think he's clearly the 3rd linebacker and should be an impact on run defense, especially. I mean, he had a really good play in this past game against the Buccaneers, knifing in for a tackle for loss. So he could very well be that kind of, I think, running mate with Peyton Wilson. If Wilson doesn't get, 85, 90% of the snaps this year, like we kind of hope he will, it might be because Holcomb just shows to be a really good run defender and can spell him sometimes.
Yeah, Shane, I want to back up 1 second here and mention a player who I think both you and I would agree is already good and hasn't played hardly at all in the preseason, 3 snaps, I think. But Nick Herbig, you watched that very first rush against the Bucs, and he played 3 snaps in this game. For my money, had 2 pressures. I think they only credited him with 1. But that first rush of the game, he just ghosted his tackle inside, didn't even get a hand on him. They devoted 3 guys over to his direction, slipped past all of them, and forced the quarterback to scramble out of the pocket and throw on the run. Like, I mean, that was a Micah Parsons looking type rush right there. I'm just really optimistic about what this guy could be as a pure pass rusher.
The thing with Herbig that's so funny to me is that I feel like if he did end up getting moved or just moved on after his rookie deal for whatever reason, which I think the Steelers should absolutely try to lock him up, but if they don't, right, if he goes to another team and becomes a starter, everyone's going to be like, who is this guy? Like because when he wins, which is a very high percentage of the time compared to a lot of guys, but when he wins, it's not even one of those things where like, oh, he got past a tackle late or what. He wins fast and in a way that like the tackle doesn't even know what happened half the time. It is very, very fun to watch him play. And again, if he was a starter somewhere, we'd be looking at a guy who I think if he was like the true designated pass rusher, because with the Steelers, they don't give their guys enough breathers to actually have a true designated pass rusher, but at least not when they're both healthy. But if he was playing like 50-60% of the snaps and a lot of the third downs and occasional like passing down situations on first and second down, we'd be looking at a guy who could very well be a double-digit sack guy in the NFL. He just doesn't have the runway to do that right now.
Yeah, could you be a Hassan Reddick, a Mike Huff, like that type of rusher? Maybe you could. I mean, he's
he
really
absolutely
talented.
Could. Yeah.
So I look at a different, and not to get too long-winded on Herbig here, but I look at a different player who actually came from the same school, a guy by the name of Zach Bond. Mm-hmm. And on his first team, he didn't do much, but once they got him in the right position for him, which again, different position,
right,
better as an off-the-ball guy. Yeah. But Zach Bond is an incredible football player. And I think Nick Herbig is just really good. And so I'm interested to see where he can go from here. Where can you take that game from here? He was like one of the youngest players in the 2023 draft. And so he's still very young at this point as well. Shane, moving on now for the players with the stock up, I got to point to Brandon Echols at the cornerback position. Mm-hmm. He's outperformed my expectations. When the film that I watched of him on the Jets, I wasn't enthralled by, but I think that he's had a really strong summer, and then he follows that up with a couple of nice preseason performances.
Yeah, he's the guy too that like his tape with the Jets has been very up and down, but he has the athleticism, he has experience. Like this is the type of corner you want to have as one of your depth corners, because you do not want to have, especially Corey Trice right now, who just can't stay healthy, as your only like actual viable backup, right? Because when Trice is out there and healthy, he definitely is, but he doesn't play. So you need to have somebody else out there. When you have 2 older corners and a Joey Porter Jr. who struggled at times, like you need to have guys who can actually go out there, give you real reps, and not just be floundering out there. And I think Echols can at least do that from what he's seen or from what he's shown thus far.
All right, Shane, anybody else that you want to mention in the stock up report before we go with the players with stock falling down?
I mean, I think Juan Thornhill, you have to mention. I think his first preseason game was very good. I don't know what his ceiling really is as a safety at this point, because we've seen he really had a rough go with the Browns, but it is the Browns. How much can you put on that with him? Like, is it just that or is it him? I do think he's at least shown enough flashes to where you're like, okay, there might be something there with him as a safety.
All right, Shane, then let's go to the stock down. I'm going to kind of breeze past the quarterbaks here. I mean, Will Howard, obviously you wish they would have played. I don't think that his roster spot is in jeopardy, so we'll still go past him. Running back position, we've already talked about Caleb Williams going up. I don't think that anybody else really stood a shot outside of the top 3 guys. Gainwell is what it is. Like, it's the sample's too small to judge off of. Going over to tight end, I mean, you look at a guy like J.J. Galbraith really hurt himself, I think, just showing that he's pretty incapable of being an inline blocker when they called upon him for that. Yeah. Which is great for Connor Hayward. It's great news, and especially Aaron Rodgers' recent comments where just couldn't say enough good things about him on Not Just Football with Cam Hayward, praising his hearts and smarts. But I think that any shot of like the DJ Thomas Jones, JJ Galbraith. Thomas Jones obviously got waived injured, but Galbraith had a golden opportunity there in the preseason and wasn't able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, it would be tough anyway, to be fair to him, to make
It would. It was a long shot for sure.
Like, so in that sense, it's like it doesn't matter that much for the Steelers case, but for his, not ideal.
Yeah, for sure not. Offensive line, I mean, you could cluster the entire group of second and third stringers together. Like, it's just everybody has looked
good,
pretty bad overall. Gareth Warren with penalties, with sloppy play.
Now too, I think,
and Stephen Jones had the sloppy play this past game too. And so it's like, man, you better really, I mean, you're putting a lot of eggs into the Calvin Anderson basket and then the Spencer Anderson basket that if you have to call upon those guys, that they're going to be good. And I just don't feel confident they are. But the whole stock report is down on the second and third string O-line.
Yeah, no one really notable that's doing well. Like, I would have liked to see more from Andres Pete. I think he had some good pass blocking reps in this past game, but he just, again, like, he's playing 33 snaps in a second preseason game at this point in his career. Yeah. Like, he's just not really a guy that you're going to rely on.
For a veteran and former first round pick, you would expect him to do better than what he's doing
as a pass blocker. Yeah, but I don't know. It's tough. Like, again, this depth, it's just really not there. And again, most teams unfortunately don't have much going on there at depth. So we're not unique in that sense. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, Shayne, let's move over to the defensive line. Isaiah Loudermilk's been really quiet this summer, this preseason. I just don't see it. I don't see what he offers at this point that you could not get from Y.A. Black from day one. I think you're getting a stronger, longer, better overall player, honestly. We haven't seen him play in an NFL game yet, but I think the bar is so low for Loudermilk that I just don't see. I don't see maybe reserving that final roster spot for him. Maybe it should go to somebody else, but he has not really impressed me again.
No, Loudermilk has always been a guy he's the definition of like a placeholder defensive lineman. Like, he'll go out there, he'll try really hard. He probably won't do much of anything of note, but he probably won't embarrass himself most of the time either. Like, that's pretty much what he's been. I think there's much more to be had with other guys in the roster than him at this point. Even a guy like Logan Lee, who at least has potential, I think, from an athletic standpoint, Loudermilk just doesn't really have any upside at this point. Really never did, probably.
Shayne, another guy that I want to mention, and I agree with you there, I would just be way more apt to keep Logan Lee. He's the second-year pro. You didn't get a good look at him. He's got some inside-out versatility in terms of being that 3-4 base end, the 5 tech, but also has played nose tackle a little bit with the Steelers here. So I would rather, if it comes between a battle with those two guys, I'd rather go with Lee because he's not more unproven, and I'd rather at least see what you got there. Moving on here, Shayne, this one is, for whatever reason, it's a little bit controversial. I think that because fans are pushing back, it's the draft pick. But I got to talk about Jack Sawyer for a second. I've not been impressed with Jack Sawyer as a pass rusher. I think that the weaknesses we saw on his film at Ohio State are showing up in the first 2 preseason games. And that is, he doesn't have a uber explosive get off. He's not very bendy. And so in turning that edge, he doesn't do particularly well. He needs to play to his strengths, which is kind of that power and inside move. You have to find a faster route to get there because as a pure speed rusher, you are going to be kind of in the bottom of the barrel there. You've got to find a unique way to win. He's not going to beat TJ Watt. You're not going to be able to win the same way. So I even think replicating your game after TJ Watt could do him some harm in some ways because he's not going to be able to get there as fast as Watt does. I'm just not overall impressed with him as a rusher so far.
Again, this was, to me at least, this was exactly what was going to happen, right? And it's just, he is, to me, a 4th or 5th run defending, smart, IQ edge. Like, this is not a guy who has the burst, the juice to really threaten the corner on any tackles that are worth being out there, right? Like, if it's a bigger, slower tackle, he's probably not going to be able to get around him fast enough because of the size difference. If it's a slower, or if it's a smaller, quicker tackle, he's not going to have the athleticism to beat him, cross his face, do any of that stuff. he has to just lean into his power and try to build that up a little bit more, because I think even as a power player, he just lacks a lot of lower body like power. Really, is where I think he was hurt the most. He to me, again, he was a guy that if you took in the fourth round, it's a little early for me, but with the consensus ranking, obviously everyone wants it to be a steal. I just don't think that it is.
Yeah, I think that fans came in with really high expectations because of his name value coming from the championship team over at Ohio State. He's been there for a while, but he just doesn't have hip flexibility. He's not very fast. And so when you're lacking those two things as an edge rusher, you better be really strong. And so I think that his best route to becoming a solid NFL player is by just adding more muscle mass, adding that lower body
He's
strength.
got to build
and
up
just
his frame a little
yeah,
bit.
winning as a pure power rusher that can kind of just long arm you back into the quarterback, or win with inside power, maybe converting some speed to power. But he needs to find a faster route to get there, because he just looks kind of slow overall as a pass rusher. And he's had lots of reps too in these first two games. Again, don't want to come down too hard on him.
I think 46 pass rushing snaps so
yeah,
far.
And he is a rookie day 3 pick. And so I don't want to come down too hard on him here. It's 2 preseason games into his career, but not super impressed with what I've seen so far. I want to talk about, let's go from one rookie to the next, and that in the stock down here, and that is Carson Bruner, a guy who I included in my roster, my first few roster predictions. I'm not going to do that in my next one unless I see something different from him here. It's Mark Robinson's job still, because Robinson has looked like the more intense physical player out there. Bruner just kind of has been lost in the shuffle, just really hasn't stood out in a positive light in the preseason. And I was a little bit more optimistic about him because he at least tested like a good athlete. He's a younger guy. His tape is decent in college, but it looks like he's going to begin his career on the practice squad.
Yeah, and I think that's fine for someone picked where he was. I don't think this is like a disaster for him or anything like that. But I think you're right that Robinson is just the more frantic, he plays harder and faster. He has more experience doing this, right? I think especially as a guy who's going to have to be a special teamer in Bruner's case if he was going to make the roster. Robinson just has way more reps at that. He's better at that right now. And I think until Bruner has a chance to kind of get up to speed in the NFL, because that's a big part of the problem for guys that are drafted this late a lot of times, is they didn't show enough to get drafted earlier, and then they're trying to adapt to NFL speed. It takes some time sometimes for those guys. So hopefully he can figure it out. He does have I think the athleticism required to do it. Just needs, I think, clearly some time on the practice squad probably.
Yeah, for sure. And Shayne, I want to talk about the guy that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, so
I think you are too. And maybe the biggest plummeting stock player on the entire roster right now. And it's for nothing that he did on the field. It's because of his absence from the field. That's Corey Trice Jr., a guy that I've been super bullish on. I think that the talent is phenomenal. He's 6'3", 206, 33-inch arms, hip fluid, ball skills. He's got starting cornerback traits, and those flashes were 100% there. You go back and look at the Denver game last year, look at what he did when he's been on the field, outside of the absurd task of trying to, for whatever reason, cover Jamar Chase one-on-one with no safety help, which Tyler Lawson, that is a fireable offense last year in a must-win game. Outside of that game, every time he's been on the field, I've been impressed. The problem is he's not on the field often.
Last year, he doesn't play.
11-game stretch in the middle of the season. He's missed 3 or so weeks now with the hamstring injury. It's not looking good. This was a guy, Shayne, that I could have almost guaranteed you was in line to be the team's starting dime backer when Pittsburgh was in dime, and maybe the first cornerback off the bench when the team is in nickel. He's that good in that talent, and I think that the coaching staff and Omar Khan, they like him a lot. They just know that he's been made of glass, and that has not changed.
Yeah, and it's just unfortunate when a player as talented as this just doesn't have the physical ability to handle the pressures of the sport. Like the amount of athleticism he has at that size is ultimately his undoing, I think, is what it comes down to. I think some guys have those physical traits and their body just can't hold up from it. Like that's to me what it probably is, and those guys usually just never end up getting healthy.
Yeah. Hurt guys tend to stay hurt, and that's exactly what we've seen from Corey Trice. It's unfortunate. We'll see where the team lies on him. Obviously, if they have to put him on IR before the start of the season, he is done for the year. He cannot play, and that's already happened to Trice before. Are they going to waive him injured, or are they going to just cut him out, right? I don't know where the team stands with him right now. I just knowing the talent, Shayne, I would still, he's already burnt me a couple times. I would give him one more shot here. I'd find a way to sneak him onto that 53-man roster. If he's not ready to go, put him on IR, eligible to return, get him back for the second half of the year, play the long game with it, not the short game. And then after that, Shayne, I might have to agree with everybody else. If he has one more big soft tissue injury after this, it's like, all right, we can't do this anymore. And maybe the Steelers are there already. And I would understand if they are. So Trice is plummeting stock, unfortunately. And along with Trice, Dante Kent, other rookie here. So whole day 3 rookies. Yeah. And again, it's not really his doing. It's when you're not able to play and you haven't seen the field often as a 7th round pick, your chances of sticking around are very slim. I think that he's a guy destined to start his career on the practice squad as well.
Yeah, and that's, again, he's been banged up. I think he showed some flashes before he got banged up. So, like, there's a chance that he can compete for a spot next year. But, again, when you're 7th round pick in a deep corner room, guess what? You're not probably making it anyway. And you certainly are making it if you're not playing. So, it's just what it comes down to. It's unfortunate for him.
All right, Shayne, any other names that we missed here? Stock up or stock down?
I mean, Robert Woods, I think.
Oh, yeah. Woods, we should have mentioned. That is not good for him.
Not good. I mean, he's 34,
33 years old, yeah.
He's had a really great career. I just think it's probably over for him.
Yeah.
Like, I just do. And the whole receiver room has played pretty well overall, except for him mostly. Especially guys who've been playing a good bit. And, like, again, getting snaps in the 4th quarter of preseason game, just not good for Robert Woods. So I assume he's destined for the cut list, basically. So we'll see.
Yep, and I liked what I've seen from Roman Wilson. I've mentioned that earlier in the show. Scotty Miller's having another good camp. It didn't equate to much last year for the Steelers. He saw like 20% of the snaps and didn't do anything with it. But another guy that's, I mean, at least at this point in time, I think would be on track to grab that final wide receiver spot unless the Steelers go and find an upgrade elsewhere. All right, Shayne, I just want to do one more thing before we log off from today's show, and that is Steelers versus Panthers, Week 3 preseason finale preview. What are you watching for in this game? We've already learned of some of the players who will not be playing. Aaron Rodgers, obviously among them, TJ Watt. But of the guys who are going to be on the field, what are you looking for most?
I think I'm looking just to see, because this is last chance we're going to get to see it before we wait for cuts to come in. What order does everyone start in and come out in, and when do they play? Because that's a really good indicator at this point, who they think is going to make this team and who they either don't think is going to, or at least is fighting for it truly at this point. Like, do we see Beanie Bishop out there in the 3rd or 4th quarter still getting reps? Do we see, how much of Skylar Thompson do we even see, right? How much of Mason Rudolph do we see? Because, like, are they going to just, at this point, they've seen enough from Skylar, they might want to look to move him. Do they even play him much in this game? Do they just let Logan Woodside play it out most of the time? Does Caleb Johnson get a ton of work still, like he's gotten in the first 2 preseason games? Or do they kind of know what they expect from him now, and maybe they'll let the other guys go out there and just kind of run the string out? That's the type of stuff I'm looking for right away, because that probably matters more than anything else that happens on the field.
You nailed it, Shayne. That's what I was going to say as well. Canales is not playing his starters for the Panthers, but for the Steelers, you want to look for beginning and end, right? The guys that play first and are pulled quickly. That's a terrific sign for those guys that especially if we consider them bubble players, you play early and then you get pulled from the game quickly. That's great. If you are playing late into the game, that's a bad sign for you. And it means that the competition is very much alive. The Steelers are trying to get one final look before they go into the meeting room together and say, yeah, we got to cut bait with this guy. So keep an eye on which players are still playing, like 3rd, especially 4th quarter. If there's a notable name out there in the 4th quarter at all, like in this meaningless Week 3 preseason game, 2 weeks before the cusp of the regular season, that's not a good sign. So definitely look for that. We'll see. I also want to mention, can Skylar Thompson put together another preseason performance, maybe more like the one he did in Jacksonville, just enough to increase that stock? And then where do Steelers go from there? Can they sucker a 7th round pick out of somebody for him? Some of those guys on the trade bubble that we mentioned as well. Anything else, Shayne, that you're looking for in this finale?
I do want to see just the offensive line backups and all, they just need to play better. They do. Like, especially the backups. Like, I need to see something from this backup group because you're going to be playing again mostly backups because the Panthers aren't putting their guys out there. You have to at least show that your backups are able to deal with other teams' backups, because if they can't deal with their backups, whose starters are they going to deal with if they have to come in? Like, that's just a real thing that we have to look for. Like, I'm going to be watching the trench play very closely for a lot of reasons, but primarily to see how the offensive line backups do.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that assessment. And if it looks bad from the backup offensive line against second, third stringers, guys that aren't going to make NFL rosters, then you know that something needs to be fixed there.
Yeah.
You've got an issue on your hands. Yeah, Shayne, I would say those young guys, again, some of the guys that we mentioned, Roman Wilson, Derek Harmon. But I would also say be very cautious this week. Get them out of the game early. If they make a play or two, that's all it's going to take. Like the Steelers can't have anything jeopardizing their chances by suffering a catastrophic injury in a meaningless exhibition game. You got to get into the season healthy. So far, knock on wood, they've been very fortunate in that regard. They had only a couple of big injuries, and it was like to Donald Parham, like before training camp even started. You want to avoid disaster, and you can do that. You just gotta control the snap count here in this finale. All right, Shayne. We go live on this show every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also check out Josh Yoris' show. He goes live on Mondays at 1:30 p.m. Thank you for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on X at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain Steelers podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.